All right.
Hang
I'm
on.
going to check the levels here. We are we are going. I'm going to see if you can hear me okay, Dan. All right. Can you hear everything okay over there?
I can hear everything great.
All right, perfect.
I hear nothing but blues greatness, sir.
Oh, goodness sakes.
Blues wonderfulness.
How
That's
you
a
doing,
word.
bud?
I'm doing great.
Good.
How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
Good. Cool, dude. You sound good. You look good. Um,
Yeah, my hair turned out okay today.
yeah. How
Once
long it
every
take you
three
to blow
months,
dry
it
that
actually turns
stuff?
out okay.
How much time do you spend blow drying that? And do you get one of those flat irons and like do it down like that?
Well, when I was in high school, I did. That,
Shut up.
listen, I was right in the middle of the '80s with everything, so
Dude, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
those pictures will never surface.
We shall find those at some point and publish them for the world to see. So, dude, thanks for being here, and thank you to everybody who's on this event. Really thank you for your time and being here with us. Hopefully, we're going to bring you something that's helpful and awesome, and you're going to get a lot of benefit from this today. We thought we would do a really simple live session on the 3 must-know tips for hot blues solos. And do not be deceived by the title of this, because it sounds kind of like generic, but this is going to be good. Steve actually showed me all of the stuff he's going to talk to you about today. It's going to be 3 different topics. One is, all this is approaching blues soloing. So the first is going to be swing versus straight rhythm. So the way that the rhythm of the song is going will dictate how you can solo.
Yeah, the
Kind of
group.
put some parameters
Sure.
around it, right?
Yep.
Oh, the groove. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. The other part is tempo. Like, is the tempo fast? Is it upbeat? Is it slow and like minor? Key. Well, I'll just combine things. So is it fast or slow? So that's tempo. And then the third part is going to be major versus minor. So when can you use major? When can you use minor? When can you combine them for some kind of ear-bending quality of your solo, which is super cool. Steve's going to teach you all of that today. I'm super excited. I'm glad that you're here with us. If you want to learn all this stuff, stay with us. Keep watching. If you want to learn it even faster, you can check out Steve's brand new course. It's called Blues Licks, and it's currently available at guitarzoom.com, and it is selling like hotcakes. A whole lot of folks have jumped on board with this, Steve, and I'm totally stoked that they have, because in that course there's like 86 licks that you go through, and it goes through classic. It goes all the way from, you know, kind of the early stuff all the way down to the modern times of some guy like maybe Joe Bonamassa, and it's a really great course, and people are already loving it. So if you want to check that out, guys, you can check it out at guitarzoom.com. If someone would put that down in the comments below for me, that would be awesome. guitarzoom.com. You just go there. And also, guys, if you enjoy this, one of the greatest compliments that you can give to Steve and the whole team over here at GuitarZoom is to share it with somebody. That would be really cool to share this at some point. Let somebody know that come watch it. Get cool stuff from listening to the old Steve Stines. All right, brother. So where do we take this? Where do we start this groove out?
Well, let's start off by just talking about kind of the mistake that I get a lot of comments from people that talk about blues, you know, or backing tracks and jam tracks, whether they're learning stuff off YouTube or, you know, they bought a pack of backing tracks or whatever the case may be. And what I find is that so often everybody's approaching, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people are approaching everything exactly the same way. And the thing that I wanted to talk about today is that there's a lot of different options of things that you need to be aware of that you might not even be thinking about, from as simple as you're learning how to play. Let's say you're learning your scales and you're learning blues, you're learning blues licks or whatever it might be, and your teacher or your instruction, whatever that is, was teaching you to do all of this in E, right? And then you find a backing track that you know, the first backing track that popped up was B flat. So now all of a sudden you feel kind of stifled because you don't really know B flat, right? So, you know, before we even get started with this stuff, think about your comfort zone as a player. Think about what feels most comfortable for you, and try and cater your backing tracks or your jam tracks around your comfort zone to begin with. And then, you know, if you want to start working in other keys and other, you know, things to make to sort of challenge yourself, that's great. But understand where your comfort lies before you even get started. So knowing the key is really important. So if you're learning how to play all your pentatonic scales or blues scales or whatever it would be in the key of E or the key of A or the key of G or whatever, that's a really great place to begin. Okay?
Yep.
So that's the first thing I want to say, is just understanding that as we go through these 3 steps that Dan just mentioned, you're going to notice as we talk about these and go, oh yeah, that makes more sense with what I'm comfortable with. Oh, that one doesn't make as much sense. And you might start realizing that that's maybe where some of your problem spots have arisen. So, so the first thing Dan mentioned is the groove, okay? Swing versus straight groove. Now, for our conversation, swing and shuffle are going to be used interchangeably. Okay, I'm not going to get into the conversation of the difference between swing and shuffle. It almost seems like it's more of like a drum thing, the accents and things like that. But understand that a swing, for me, swing really is just like bump, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump. It's triplets. Da 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 da. And I always think of it like the heartbeat. You know, you're hearing. That would be a swing versus a straight groove, which would think like keep your hands to yourself, right? Would be a straight kind of groove, where would be more of a swing kind of groove. And so when you hear a backing track or you're going to jam over something, the first thing to understand is what are you dealing with? And now we'll talk about why. Okay, so it's either a swing feel, that triplet feel, or that heartbeat feel, bump, ba bump, ba bump, ba bump, or it's straight. Okay, the difference, the primary difference being, if it's straight, you're dealing with even numbers like 2, 4, 8, 16, that sort of thing. If you're dealing with a swing feel, you're basing it off of the triplet feel, which is da 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 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. And I want to show you an example here.
Yeah.
So this first one that I've got is just a backing track, and this one's in C minor. Okay, so I'm going to head up to the 8th fret here. And I'll keep this nice and easy. I'm just going to keep that C minor pentatonic there. So when I start this, so what you'll notice is as I'm playing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and those are my options rhythmically, the groove that this song is giving me. It's straight, 1, 2, or 4, however I want to think about that, right? So when I go to play over the top of this, it's giving me a tempo, obviously, right? And we're going to come back to that in just a little bit. But I know my tempo is. So now as a player, what I have to decide is, I know it's straight, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and, but what I have to think about is, what am I capable of playing of those kind of 3 options? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E. Because obviously as I get faster, it becomes more difficult. I need to be more skilled in my ability of being able to move around the fretboard at that faster speed, where if I'm playing at dun 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 dun, see, it's a little bit easier, and if I go here, it's even easier. Now, I want to combine any and all of these as I can, right, in my playing. But the first step is being aware that it is an even feel. So as I start this jam track again here, and again, I'm going to keep it nice and easy. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm moving between dun 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 dun. I'm moving between those three worlds at this tempo again. Now we're going to get to tempo in just a little bit because that can make a significant difference on whether you can do all three of these or not, right? If the tempo is way too fast, that's going to make this really difficult to get to that third one. If the tempo is slower, you have more option of that. And again, we're going to get to that conversation, but understanding that straight feel, bum, 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 is giving us those three different options. So let's just stay with that for now. So I'm going to go on to swing, but I just want to see if you got anything, Dan, you want to add to that.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, guys, you can always put your questions down in the comments wherever you're watching this, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, wherever you happen to be seeing this right now. Please just put your comments down there and to help us out in terms of like how we can help you. One thing that leapt to my mind, Steve, when you were playing that is like, how do you? It seems very natural to you to, this 3 versus 2 thing where you're like, ta, 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 okay, that's straight. Then you're like, ta, 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 that's shuffle, or we're calling it swing. But to the person who doesn't, have all the training that you do, what's the best way for them to, when they're hearing a song, to kind of go, oh, that's that swing thing that Steve was talking about, or, oh, that's straight.
Sure, and we haven't even gotten to the swing yet, so let's listen to that one too. But the straight will remind you of a march. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? Dun, dun, dun. It's very, well, it's straight, right? It's very this. The swing is going to give you that heartbeat feel. If you can think of a heartbeat, you're dealing with a triplet. So let me show you a swing, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Ba, 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 ba. And for me, like Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin is straight. Right? So whenever I think of a straight groove, I think of that sort of thing, where dun 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 dun, right? So it depends on which song you're looking at, and to be completely honest, there are times when it's kind of hard to tell. Like there's certain reggae songs out there and things like that where it's almost sometimes hard to tell, but you just do the best you can. So with like this one that I'm playing now this one's in the key of A, and again, if the tempos or if the volumes are a little off, you got to forgive me because these are just
sounds great to me.
Tracks, but what's that?
Sounds great to me.
Okay, perfect. So let me start that over. This is in the key of A, and again, I'm not going to do anything overly fancy. I just want to show you the groove. To this, what I'm thinking about is bump, ba, bump, ba, bump, ba, bump, which then gets converted into dot, 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 dot. Because if you think about the heartbeat, all you're doing is you're skipping the second of the triplet. So bump, 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 bop, 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 bop. So I'm just adding that back in and making it a triplet in my head. Dun, 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 dun. And of course, just like anything else in music, when we talk about whole notes and half notes and quarter notes and eighth notes and all these other things, I just try and explain to people, all you're really doing is going twice as fast to whatever the last thing was. So a triplet is dun, 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 dun. So you'd have to go twice as fast. Decca, 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 which, again, might seem too fast, and maybe it is. I'm just saying, I always weigh out those options for myself. So not because I want to play fast, but because I need other options here to keep this thing interesting to a listener and to myself, to be honest. So as I'm listening to this, let me go back to that scratching thing I did. So I start with this. There's my groove. Let me move it to triplets. And then and to be completely honest with you, the way I would strum or even like kind of scat sing are that's the way I would play when I'm soloing. So the rhythms that I'm thinking in my head, like if I was strumming bump 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 ba da 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 dun 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 da 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 dun 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 dun, those are things that would transfer into my playing as I'm playing. Now the triplet requires a little bit more care. It's at least in my opinion, it's a little bit harder than the straight groove, so you have to be careful. Now again, we're going to get the tempo, and that's going to either help or hurt us in this whole process, because we have to be aware of that. But that's the first thing, is when you hear that backing track that you're going to play over, you want to decide whether or not you're hearing a straight groove or a swing or shuffle groove. Now, to be completely honest with you, 95% of the time you're going to hear a straight groove if you're listening to any other style of music. It's in the blues genre that you hear a lot more of this swing groove. It's not like we don't hear it once in a while in blues or excuse me, in rock or country or something. But if we do, a lot of times it's because it's blues influenced. Like the groove will be bluesy anyway, right? Maybe it's not traditional 12-bar blues or something like that, but it's still got a bluesy feel to it. So if you're playing, you know, Iron Maiden, chances are it's probably straight most of the time, right? If you're playing whatever. So
I'd imagine.
Yeah. Well, and it's just important to understand that, where if you go to Led Zeppelin or you go to AC/DC or something, okay, well now the odds are more that you may see a swing in there once in a while, but you're still going to see a lot of straight stuff. Like, you know, boy, I don't even know if I remember how to play it. Right? Black Dog. You know, it's straight. So you want to get used to being able to hear that. And like I said, when you leave the blues genre, sometimes you'll come across songs where it's really hard to tell. You know, one of the first songs I teach people when they start learning how to play is Horse with No Name. Horse with No Name, and I show them an easy way of doing it. He's just going. And if you think about the song, you know, the horse is trotting along, right? Dun, 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 and there's your horse trot or your heartbeat or whatever you're thinking of, right? That's that swing. And so when I first teach it to people, I won't tell them the straight versus swing thing to see if they organically, naturally feel it.
Get it, yeah.
Right? And then if they don't, then, you know, then we'll talk about it and all that sort of thing. But you'd be surprised at how many people can feel that right away, just without even talking about all these differences. They just kind of get it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Steve, I want you to explain the scratching thing that you did. Guys, I don't know if you picked up on this, but he was talking about figuring out this rhythm and how your groove should be in terms of approaching your solo. And the very first thing he did to figure that out is not starting to play a bunch of notes and a bunch of solos. Or, you know, he didn't start there. He started by listening to the jam track and then just muting the strings with his left hand and then just scratching out that rhythm in order to figure out, before you ever started playing, because until until you can feel the rhythm, you don't need to add in notes to complicate things more, because the rhythm and the notes, that's two things you got to think about. I should go this way. There's two things you got to think about versus scratching. You're not worried about chord, where your hand goes, notes, or anything like that. You're just scratching the rhythm out.
Right. When I teach people, I've taught my entire life, taught guitar. And when I have a new student, I don't teach them like chords right away. I teach them rhythm right away, because then they can go home and learn to play rhythm with whatever music they enjoy, whether it's what I like or not. They can learn to scratch along with music and develop a sense of feel and a sense of groove to the music. Because for me, chording is kind of black and white. You either know how to play a G chord or you don't. And there's different ways of playing it. But at the end of the day, you're either playing G right and it sounds like G, or you're not, right? If you play it here, it's not going to sound right. If you play it here, whether it's 3-finger or 4-finger, it's going to sound fine. But the music doesn't really start until you hit the strings, right? When you go, how you strum that chord makes the groove. So I teach independence of learning your chords and learning your strumming separately. So they're two things that students practice on a daily basis. So with that in mind, when I'm listening to a song, I can sense the tempo, but then the first thing that I do is I start figuring out those 3 levels that I just showed you. Dun, 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 decka, decka. And maybe there's more. If it's really slow, there might be more. If it's really fast, there might be less, right? But I start weighing my options. And so in my head, even if I'm not physically hitting the strings, that's what I'm thinking about is these, then these. Because, right, if I'm doing this, and I go here, and then I go... Now, I might be able to strum all that down, but it's going to be really hard. But if I go... it becomes easier. Well, then in my head, I'm thinking... like, if I use that same kind of strumming technique as I'm practicing, or as I'm performing, or whatever it is I'm doing, right? My hand already knows the direction I'm going to take when I go for a particular lick or something like that, because I've already worked that out in my head. Strumming groove is something that I see in my head. I see my hand moving to the music. So scratching is something that's really, really important to learn how to do. And like Dan said, it takes out, like what I try and do when I'm teaching is separate all the elements out, because oftentimes with, more, I don't want to say the word beginner, but that's what it is. You don't understand that all these things are separate things. Like it all looks like it's cohesive and your hands are working and your brain's doing, and it's not. It's like every part of your body is fighting against each other when you're learning how to play guitar, because this hand is doing something that's completely non-related to this hand, right? So it looks easy and it looks natural when you watch somebody doing it, but you've got to train all these independent components to work together. So hopefully that makes sense.
No, it's great, Steve. This is fantastic, man. This is like stuff that I wish I had known or had the opportunity to learn. There was no YouTubes around when you and I were learning all this stuff. It was, you had to find a neighborhood dude who was a few years older than you to help you out, So guys, if you're liking this, if you're loving it, let us know with your comments, your love. Show us some love down there. And if you want to learn this stuff in depth, I would highly recommend you grab Steve's Blues Licks course, because it's all this stuff plus. You can check that out at guitarzoom.com. Blues Licks by Steve Stine. So Steve, one of the things that sprung to my mind when you were talking about this is when I was a college kid at the Eastman School up in the old Rochester, New York, which is about as cold as North Dakota where you live, I think. Maybe not, but it was pretty damn cold to me, a Southern boy. I had this Russian piano teacher. Her name was Marina Lomatsov. She was about 6 feet tall, and she was very scary. And Marina, if you ever see this, I love you. You taught me a lot, but I was terrified of her when I was there. One of the things, every time I went to that piano lesson, man, is she would... like if there was a scale passage or something in a piece that I was learning and I screwed up the scale, essentially, she would just take the top of the piano lid and just shut the thing. And then she would have me put my hand on the piano lid where my hand would naturally rest, and then play that passage. And of course I would screw it up. I'd screw up the fingering. I'd screw up the, I'd screw up the rhythm, and she drilled into my head that until you can actually, if there's like you were saying, how you've got your left hand, you've got your right hand, you've got rhythm, you've got strumming, you've got a chord, you've got a scale, you've got like all of these things happening. The more you can separate that stuff out and chunk it down to the lowest common denominator, so to speak, to the smallest piece of information that you're trying to process, the faster you can master that and then add in the other elements. So she would shut that piano lid, have me just play on top of the piano lid, not worrying about the key, not worrying about anything other than the rhythm and then the fingering for that. And boy, then when you lift, once you can get that right, then you lift the lid up on the piano and actually play the passage, it's night and day. So guys, whenever you're learning this stuff, try to chunk it down to the smallest thing you possibly can learn.
Right. Well, and I think that's the misconception of improvisation. And I'm not, again, trying to disagree with anybody out there, but improvisation isn't really improvisation. It's not like you were stranded on a desert island and you find this instrument and all of a sudden you're like making the coolest and fastest and amazing chops on the instrument. Just, you know, it requires process. It requires time. It requires repetition, all these things. And what happens in improvisation is you don't really know the order in which things come out. And you don't always know that everything's going to work out the right way because you haven't written it all out. Like a composed solo is different than an improvised solo. Because you've planned everything. You've figured out what you want and when you want it and how you want it. An improvised solo is all of these things in your head are kind of regurgitating back out at different times. And the more of this stuff you've got organized in your head and you understand and you've got a handle on, the more options you have as it comes out of you. But you really have to understand that improvisation is really just, it's you know, again, an expulsion of things that you've done, but you just don't know in what way, in what form, and how. You don't have all that like a preconceived solo would be. You're not sure how it's all going to come out. But the more you practice improvisation and the more tools you have, the more you practice all the elements, the better the improv gets.
I love it. In fact, I was actually listening to some theater people who are improv specialists. And if you've ever been to an improv show, guys, you know, you go and you're just fascinated by their ability to come up with these things off the top of their head. But in reality, they study their craft and they have specific techniques of working with other improv people that they know in a certain situation, you always ask this type of question. So you don't pin the other person down into a corner so they can't like continue the scene or whatever. And the best people are the ones who are the most skilled in mastering those improv techniques. So when they get on stage, it looks like it's completely random, but man, they're basically just drawing on all this training and all the skills that they've built.
And I'm going to add this too. That doesn't mean that there aren't those phenoms out there that get to the answer quicker than the rest of us, right? They can get to that center of whatever this stuff is we're talking about faster at age 15 than I am at age 49, right?
Right.
There are those people. There's no doubt about it. But the rest of us have to work at it. And what I did find too is when I was younger, I was able to do things with less thought, but at some point I hit a wall. This is me personally, where I had to go back and figure out what I was doing because there were things that just were failing. They weren't working as well as they were 10 years ago, and I had to go back and figure out why and what, because I had used up all the natural things that were happening, and I had gotten to a place where now I needed to rework it, rethink what I was doing. So again, that's kind of side, but just be aware of that when you're practicing all this stuff.
Yeah. And I did the same exact thing for me personally. And where I really leveled up in terms of just my comfortability, my confidence and everything was when I really learned theory. And it took me 4 years in college to finally master it. I hate that word, but to really get to a level where I was like, oh, I could walk in a group of musicians and not be intimidated, right?
Sure.
Because I understand what they're talking about. Guys, I know we're talking about blues licks, but if you're interested in what Steve was just talking about, the theory part, he has a master class called Music Theory Masterclass, and it's one of our most popular courses. You can check that out at guitarzoom.com as well if you're interested in learning the theory part of all this stuff. But today, of course, we're talking about blues licks here. That was a good diversion, Steve. That's really, I think that's important for people to understand how to chunk that stuff out and not get overwhelmed, because especially we're always overwhelmed in everything we do.
Sure.
So the more you can simplify it, the easier it is to learn.
I saw a post from Marty Friedman, if you know who Marty Friedman is.
Do I know who Marty Friedman
is?
is?
And he was trying to play this thing. It was on his page, on his Facebook page, and he was trying to play this thing, and he couldn't do it. And he kept looking at the camera and going, I suck, and then he'd laugh, and then he'd try it again. And I don't remember it, the exact quote, but the description was something about even the pros can't do everything. Mm-hmm. And this video, I wanted to post this to show you that it doesn't matter how good you think you are. You know, you live in a station. You live in a place where, you know, his point was sharpen your skills at what you want to be good at. Don't try and be everything. Don't try and, that was his whole point. And I thought it was really great that he posted that because it shows that everybody is human. It's just, we tend to see what we call the greats in their bubble, in their world, right? But, you know, so often we get so, especially with social media and YouTube and videos and all those sorts of things, we're kind of all over the place. Like one day we want to do this and the next day, and I get it, and it's okay if it's motivating, but if it's derailing you, then you need to take a step back and go, okay, what am I trying to accomplish? And like Dan just said, how do I get there? Like what steps do I need to get there? That's half of education, and half of your journey is making a plan for yourself.
Yeah. You're actually, yeah. And by the way, I know it seems like it's just you're prompting me on everything that you're saying here. I have to say this, guys, if you get stuck in like, not, you know, sitting down and just noodling around when you get your guitar and not really having a systematic way of approaching your practice and getting better, Steve has a course for that. It's called the Ultimate Practice Routine. Ultimate Practice Routine, available at guitarzoom.com. Just check that out if you are having trouble in that particular area. So swing versus straight. Steve, what else can we learn about this?
Well, I think that's enough for now. I don't want to go on for 4 hours with this.
Okay.
I think swing and straight, I think that's enough for that. If we can move on to the next thing, which is tempo. Yeah. So,
tempo, cool.
Yeah. So tempo, if you think about it, when you're dealing with something that's 160 beats per minute or whatever, just hypothetically, your options become more limited in your ability to free flow, like we were talking about with improvisation, because things are tighter, things are faster, things are coming by quicker. When things are very, very slow, you don't have that box, if you will, that requires you to play that dun 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 digga 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 as much. And let me show you what I mean by that. So let's say I was doing I'll pick this one. I don't know if I think I played this already, but this is the C minor one, but I do have a new one for you too. So here's the C minor one. So I have now, that doesn't mean that that's all I can do, okay? I mean, if you think about the again in my head, if you think about da 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 da, if that went on for however long this song is, 5 minutes and 48 seconds. That gives me a lot of options of things I can and don't play. Da da ba, ba da da, da 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 da. Right? I mean, there's just a ton of things that I could do with that. Okay, but here's the deal: if I move to this one, this one's in G. This is one of my favorite little jam tracks here. Turn that down just a little bit. Okay, so this one we have bum 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 bum. Now it is a swing. Dun 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 da 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 da. Right? So there's where I've got my swing. But it sounds really really slow when I do that, right? Da, 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 da. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, that's completely valid. But because the tempo is so slow, it allows me to do what I refer to as free time soloing, where I can take that solo and
Hey, Steve, before you hit play again, it's a little hot. Your rhythm track's a little hot.
Okay, that's fine. I'll turn it down a little more.
Right.
When the tempo's slower, sorry about that, I got off track. When the tempo is slow like that, I don't have to worry about being so obligated to those dun 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 dun, dun, you know, that sort of thing. I can play more free time over the top. So if you think about what I'm doing, let me turn it down a little bit more. So what I'm really doing is I'm just swirling around. I'm thinking about the groove, I'm thinking about the tempo. I'm just not thinking about it as much. What I am thinking about, though, are the chord changes, which I'm always thinking about, right? So when the chord changes come up, I might go somewhere else or do something else. But my groove is really just pushing and pulling. Bum, 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 bum. So because I love these slower grooves like this, because you can really ebb and flow. These tempos that you're playing, or these licks that you're playing. So you'll notice I play a little faster and then I play a little slower, and I can play that freely over the top of this, and it's not really adversely affecting the groove. And then I feel that coming, right? I can feel that the one chord is coming back around. So I prepare myself for that, and that's a whole other conversation. But the point is, the tempo is slow enough to where I've got more space, where if I do this, now I'm kind of locked in. Now bump, 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 bump. Again, this is a swing, but I'm more locked in because if I try and just completely ignore the groove, now I'm not saying that it doesn't work sometimes. I completely, to be honest with you, I probably use what I'll call structured groove and free time groove. I use both of those quite frequently. But as the tempo gets faster, I have to be aware to obey and connect to that music more on a rhythmic level than I do when it's slower. When it's slower, I've got more availability to do this free thing. As the pyramid gets to the top and the tempo starts going up, I have to start obeying. Again, I hate to use the word obey, but really you need to connect. That's what music is. Music is pitch and rhythm, right? And so we have to be aware that those things are what make the music work. It doesn't mean we always have to do it. There's no rules to this, but you need to be aware of that. So when you're picking backing tracks or jam tracks to solo to, understand that the slower the track is, the more freedom you have, good or bad, to use that rhythm. Because sometimes having free rhythm is hard for people because they're like, well, I can't really connect to anything, right? So maybe you pick a medium tempo groove. Find something where the tempo is, 100 beats a minute or 120 beats per minute or something like that, and then start working with that. Do you want a straight rhythm or a swing rhythm, right? Start figuring out what that is. So hopefully that's helping you in thinking about your jam tracks and which ones you're trying to solo over, which ones are working, which ones aren't.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. When you were playing that, the straight actually over that shuffle rhythm, just a second ago, I was thinking, that actually sounds pretty good.
I mean, listen, we can't cover everything in this conversation because again, there are so many things. Like I always tell people that the beauty of rock and roll is it doesn't make any sense. Like blues doesn't at the core, there's so many things about blues that doesn't make any sense. We can argue whether it does or doesn't, but the truth is you can do so many cool things. And if you know how to do it right, it works. The problem is if you go into it and you don't understand anything and you just go, well, I'm not going to follow any rules because I don't understand any rules. Well, a lot of times you just wind up with a mess. Now, again, there are those people that can make anything sound good, right? But for most people, there's got to be some parameters to follow. And once you learn those parameters, because to be honest with you, most players, including myself, when you start learning, you don't have parameters. You don't know what the heck you're doing. You don't understand how anything works. Somebody just showed you a scale or a Motley Crue riff or whatever. So you're just working off little pieces of information that don't really add to anything. And then you ask yourself at some point, well, why aren't I getting any better? Like, why does everything just sound the same every time I solo? Well, that's why. Because you're not putting any parameters of logic on the situation you find yourself in and go, okay, so what do I want to do with this? Do I want to use some of my old school, I don't know what I'm doing? Heck yeah, sometimes you want to. But if that's all you do all the time, oftentimes you just wind up with nothing. You wind up with chaos. You know, it's like explaining to people when you're soloing, if you're never trying to target certain notes at a certain time over certain chords, think of it, and again, I don't want to get off on a tangent with that, but if you think about it, when you're playing your pentatonic scale, if you're just emphasizing everything all the time, then you're really emphasizing nothing.
Right.
Because nothing is getting more value than anything else. Now, I'm not saying that you can't, again, because I'll always get people that go, well, it works for me. If it works for you, then great. If anything works for you, then great. But if you're finding that it's not working for you, what I'm trying to do is tell you things that you can think about that can change your approach and quite possibly make what you're trying to do even better. So,
yeah, this is pure gold, man. Guys, if you're just joining us right now, we are talking about blues licks. Specifically, this entire video that we're doing right now is 3 must-know tips for hot blues solos. We have covered swing versus straight rhythm, which is that 3, breaking the beat into 3, or, da, 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 like a heartbeat, or straight. Now we're on tempo, fast versus slow.
Versus medium, really, right?
Yeah.
I mean, now that we've talked about, and it's worth, if you just joined in, it's worth going back, I think, and watching some of this to see. But it really, your approach doesn't have to be the same for every backing track. You just grab something random off YouTube. What I'd rather you do is go, okay, here's where I'm at. This is the key I like to work in. This is the groove that I like. And this is a tempo that works for me. And you try and find a backing track that fits you. Again, if you're trying to break out of something, then it's okay to go against the grain and find a track that's completely different. But if you find a track that's completely different in key, completely different in tempo, completely different in groove, and all these other things, it might be too much right away, where you might just say, okay, I'm going to try and work in a different key.
That's right.
Or I'm going to try and work in a different tempo. You don't have to just throw yourself to the wolves right away. You might try something a little bit easier and understand these things and go, okay, I just want to change one thing and give that a try.
All right. I love it.
Yeah.
So, especially if you're just joining in right now, we're talking about 3 must-know blues tips for hot blues solos. If you want to learn that, keep watching. If you want to learn it even faster, check out Steve's new Blues Licks course, cleverly titled Blues Licks by Steve Stine. Available at guitarzoom.com. And if you guys haven't seen it yet, please, somebody pop that guitarzoom.com there in the old comments box. It would be super cool. If you enjoy this, please share it with somebody you think could benefit. That would be an awesome compliment. And let's continue on here, Steve Stine, with this tempo thing.
Okay. Well, I think that's good for...
Is that good on tempo?
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, we're getting long here, and I don't want to take everybody's time forever here, but... So the next one is understanding major blues versus minor blues. And really this would work in the world of rock and roll, anything that's influenced by blues and rock. And again, that can be country, that can be pop, as long as it's got that kind of blues rock and roll influence. So when you think about playing chords like, and again, I don't want to get our video shut down, but if I go, and that's all I do, right? Okay, that you might know that song. The chords I'm playing are major. But when you go to solo over the top, you play minor. Right? You're playing more minor. And so there's this uniqueness about blues and blues-influenced music where even though the chords might be major, you're playing in minor. So what I want to do is just kind of explain to you, and I'll use actual blues as our backdrop right now, but keep that in mind. So if I was to play a 12-bar blues or whatever blues I'm playing with major chords, A major, A7, D7, E7, that sort of thing, the logic would say I'd want to be using major pentatonic because I'm playing in major, and you absolutely can play major pentatonic. But you can also play minor pentatonic over those major chords. I could play A minor pentatonic over those 3 chords, and it's going to sound like blues. It's going to sound like rock and roll. And again, that's where the rules are kind of broken. It's not about logic and theory working. It's about how it sounds. I grew up playing. I didn't know anything about theory until I hit college. Music was about what it sounded like and how you could manipulate what you were doing and make it sound good. And so there was, I never thought, well, major should be major and minor. I never even knew that until I got into college and went, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. So with major blues, major influenced music, you can solo major. Just remember that. But you can also solo minor over the top, and then the bigger step forward from that is that you learn to use both major and minor pentatonic at the same time, and you get some really unique things happening that really sound even more like blues by mixing and matching some of those notes together. And Dan and I have actually talked about this in I can't remember what other video, but in another video we talked about a lot of this stuff. But that's where it kind of culminates together is using those. So if you're in a space where you're thinking, oh, it's major, so I should solo major, and it's minor. If it's pop, and I always pick on Hootie and the Blowfish because I don't know why, but I do. Their songs, if the song is major, you're probably soloing major because there's probably very little blues rock and roll influence happening in Hold My Hand, right? Or whatever the song might be. Let Her Cry or whatever it might be. And again, I'm not dogging them. I'm just saying that is, to me, that's pop. That's not a rock and roll, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC blues infused rock and roll thing where that's what I'm talking about right now. And then here's the other side to that is when something is minor, and this goes across the board. When it's minor, it's minor. So if it's Hootie and the Blowfish, if it's Led Zeppelin, if it's, Gary Moore, like Gary Moore is one of my favorite guitar players. If it's minor, it's minor. So when the rules change and the chords become minor, you're not soloing major anymore. You're soloing minor. And again, that doesn't mean that you can never add an element of major blues over the top. That there's never an all or nothing when it comes to guitar playing and it comes to music. But most of the time, 99% of the time, if the song is based off minor chords, if the key is based off a minor chord, you're soloing in minor. Where major is this kind of weirdness depending. And again, this is where, over the years for me playing, that when I hear a song, the first thing I do is put it in a category that makes sense to me. That could be bluesy. That isn't bluesy at all. That's very metal, and therefore it's going to be very minor, or whatever it might be, right? So if I'm going to solo over, again, whatever, I keep picking on Iron Maiden, but whatever it might be, and it's not like every Iron Maiden song is minor. It's not. They have songs in major too. So, but they have very little songs that are based off blues. I'm not saying there isn't any, but most of their music isn't based off blues like, ZZ Top would be or something like that. So. Yeah.
Also, guys, I think it's important to know When I was thinking blues and I was learning blues, um, I had this idea that everything is dominant seventh. Like every 12-bar blues is dominant seventh, or it's just a straight like shuffle thing with.
Dominant seven, he means this.
Yeah, play like the 1-4-5 with all the dominant chords, so people kind of know what I'm talking about. So yeah, all those are dominant seventh chords. So they're chords basically. Not to get too weird, but it's a major triad with a minor seventh on the top. That's what makes a dominant seventh chord a dominant seventh chord. But guess what? You can have blues music that's actually minor. I don't know if people think about that. Like you could have an entire, give us an example of just using the minor sevenths, Steve. Well, like a 12-bar blues.
Yeah. I mean, listen to "Still Got the Blues." That's one of my favorite ones by Gary Moore. Go after this is done. Go listen to that song. It's just a beautiful sound.
Love
and
that.
That's, again, showing you this. So this first jam that I had, this C minor, so going back to that. C minor 7. So I'm not using those, and again, I'm not saying that they might not slip out here and there when I'm playing, because they might, but the emphasis is absolutely not on those. The emphasis is going to be on the minor scale, whether it's minor pentatonic, natural minor.
Nice.
So you can hear that it's got more of that minor flavor because the chords are minor. So I'm really thinking about, and again, I think we even did a video where we talked about scales in minor and major and all that kind of stuff too. But that's very different than this one. This one's an A. See, now I've got that major sound. So that sounds different, and I'm going to approach that differently. So again, this is what my whole point to all of this was, when you find a backing track or whatever, if it says it's in minor, my approach is going to be different than if it says it's in A or C or D or whatever, versus A minor or C minor or D minor. My approach is going to be different. I want you to think about that.
Yeah, super cool. There's lots of blues music out there, guys. It's kind of that major sound or that dominant sound or the minor sound. It just depends on what that artist wants to do with that particular song. So,
yeah, and to be honest, most blues is major. It just is. But the minor ones that you find are absolutely gorgeous.
Thrill is gone.
What's that?
The thrill is gone.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is there's just, those are really some of my favorite blues songs are the ones in minor.
Mine too.
But I think, being a metalhead, I'm always drawn to minor anyway, but because I love that sort of melancholy thing. But yeah, I mean, they sound very different than the major blues. But as a player, you want to be aware of these things. If you ever want to get together and jam with other musicians and things like that, you want to know, like, as soon as a band starts playing or whatever, you want to be able to go, okay, here's my parameters. Mm-hmm. And not because I'm trying to make you fit into some sort of box, but because I want you to have the understanding and the logic and the ability to analyze your situation and go, what's my best option, versus just, let me wing everything that I do for the rest of my life. When you live your life like that, the problem is sometimes can be absolutely magical, but then other times it can be absolutely horrendous. You know, it's nice to balance that out a little bit. You know, I know all kinds of stuff about guitar, and I still have nights that are horrendous, but they're less when you can analyze your situation and go, okay, here's what they're playing, here's the song, right? It might be a song you've never played before. Maybe you've heard the song, but you've never played it, and here comes the solo. You just got up and are jamming with some friends at a club, and they go, all right, take the solo. Oh my God, right? You got to be able to go, well, what am I doing here? What key am I in? What groove am I playing? What kind of music is this? What options do I have? If you just have one option, this is why around where I grew up, where I live, the jazz teachers, the high school jazz teachers would always send, not always, but a lot of times would send their guitar players to me, because every one of them would solo minor pentatonic over every single thing that they would do in jazz. And it would drive the teachers crazy, because they're like, this is jazz. Everything isn't minor pentatonic. This isn't blues. This is jazz. Sometimes they're related. Sometimes they overlap. But you can't just play minor pentatonic over every single jazz song. So they would send them to me to explain this whole thing to them and teach them how to approach songs differently, depending on whether it's a dominant 7, like Dan said, or a major 7 song, which would have a different feel. So something to think about a little bit.
Man, that's good stuff, guys. Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, just in context, when you have blues music and just in terms of how this stuff developed in terms of history, if you're interested in that, you know, you don't have, for example, you've got spirituals, you've got gospel, you've got acoustic blues, which really, then when the electric guitar was invented, you had these blues players who were experimenting with this really bluesy sound that they traditionally played on an acoustic guitar. And then you got guys like Elvis Presley, who grew up listening to gospel and grew up in these churches, and then they grew up listening to all this blues music. And he was like, oh, there's this electric guitar thing, and then we can put this all together. And it sounds like, you know, this rock and roll thing. And then you got the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and all of that. That's kind of the progression of it, guys. That's why when you hear Led Zeppelin, you're like, man, that sounds kind of blues, but it's got that strong driving rhythm, and you got this crazy singer over the top of it. And you're like, what is this stuff? And then that's kind of the progression of it, which I'm only bringing that up because I think it's important to remember that blues is it's a very simple, and on one hand, it's a very simple style of music. On the other hand, when you actually understand what's happening, it's not simple. It's pretty complicated.
Well, it's not, that's right. I mean, depending on how deep you go, you look at some players out there, and you know, they're so vastly different from each other the way they approach. If you look at, you know, B.B. King versus Joe Bonamassa, you know, one of my buddies, his name is Michael Wagner. I don't know if you guys know who he is. If you've never heard him before, he does stuff for like I think Jam Track Central or something like that. But just an amazing human and amazing blues player. I just love his playing. But that's the thing is when you listen to guys like Michael play, it's so natural for him, the way he approaches stuff. And that's the whole thing we're not all looking for the same thing in our blues or our rock or our country or whatever it is. You know, we all are looking for our own thing. And so I guess that was the whole point of this conversation, is just getting you to think a little bit differently about maybe your approaches to things, and understand that studying, or at least being aware of some of these things, can really make a difference in elevating your ability to play.
That's right. And I think finding a good mentor, someone that you connect with, someone that you can actually help you, whether it's Steve or whether it's somebody else, whether it's a local person that you go and sit down and play with, whether it's an online course or it's some kind of hybrid thing, a get together on Friday nights and jam together, like somebody who's on that next 2 or 3 levels ahead of you, who wouldn't mind taking you under their wing and showing you the ropes. And just because I know that Steve, both you and I have had mentors and people that have helped us. And sometimes it's just that one conversation that they show you how to do something, you've been stuck and you're just like, oh my gosh. I can't
well, and this for me, Dan, summarizes YouTube. Like, there are the viewers on YouTube that want no talking and they just want playing. And then they don't like when you talk. They just want playing. And then there's those people on YouTube that want you to explain things, because if you just play them, they don't understand how to use it.
Yeah.
Right? So as a teacher, you're always trying to think about different levels. Like, I have never considered myself a teacher of advanced players, because advanced players already know how to dig in and separate and figure out and analyze and utilize. So why am I talking to them, right? They don't need talking. They just
Right.
go out and watch. Like what I do whenever I want new stuff, I might listen to a song by whatever artist I like, find the solo, grab a piece out of there, start learning how to play it, and then add it into my playing. And I do that all the time, all the time. But as a teacher, that's not my job. As a teacher, it's to get you to think differently about something. It's always the light bulb moment that I'm looking for, is where you listen and you go, oh, that makes sense to me. I can use that. I can study that. It's not as exciting. It's not as, wow, that was an incredible lick. That was the fastest lick I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not making fun of that. Those are really important. And I look for those things too. And you should too. But every once in a while, you need to go, okay, that lick was really cool. So how do I pick it though? Like, how do I finger it? Or how do I add it into my playing? Or how do I practice it to learn how? Like, those are the questions that come up a lot in, well, how do I do something with it? And that's what I have tried to do my entire life, is explaining to people, okay, well, let's look at it. Let's break it down. Let's break it apart and figure out what's going on there. And then here you go. See what you can do with it.
Right. Yeah, I remember those old Hot Licks videos. You and I have laughed about this because I'm sure somebody watching this will remember the old Hot Licks videos. But I would save up, I cut grass and stuff and save up my money and send it into the old mail order catalog. And you sit there and you go to the mailbox every day and check to see if it finally came, and it does. And you rip into it like a monkey on a cupcake, and you shove it in the old VHS player and you hit play, and you're like, wow, that guy is really freaking good. And he isn't teaching me anything, because he's just like, he's like, oh, let me show you how easy this is, across the fretboard. And I literally remember like throwing my pick at the TV and just thinking, well, that sucked. I can't believe I spent all my money on that. And I didn't get any benefit, because this dude can play, but he can't teach. So there's always this dichotomy between being entertained on one side and being educated on the other. And I think we, especially at GuitarZoom, we're essentially an education company. And so we've always leaned towards, let's give people what they actually need so that they can actually progress. This really doesn't have anything to do with how good a player Steve might be or what he can do. It's really about what you can do and what you can learn and how you can get better.
Right, that's right. I mean, I had the same experience with those videos, but what I did learn is, once I learned more and I got better at playing, those videos, they became really invaluable to me, because I understood how to break down the information. I wasn't ready for them. And I was expecting, whoever it was, Chris Impellitteri. I remember having that video. I loved Chris. Well, I still do. I still love his playing, if you know who Chris Impellitteri is. But I was under the assumption that this guy on a video was supposed to explain to me, not having any idea who I am, where I am in the middle of North Dakota, what I'm learning. So obviously, the guy might be an amazing teacher. I wasn't ready at all for the experience I was given until later. Once I came back to them after playing for a while, I was able to.
That's fair.
Okay. So I get it now, but I wasn't ready. I had to go through all these other phases in my playing to get to a place where that made sense to me.
That's totally fair. Yeah, that makes sense actually more. I'm thinking about Eric Johnson. I think he had one of those, and I remember watching him play and just thinking, that's amazing. But yeah, being able to, finding the right person at the right time, at the right place for you and where you're at. And look, if you've enjoyed being with us here, if you've gotten some value out of this 3 must-know tips for hot blues solos, we talked about, just for anybody who might be joining us super late, we talked about swing versus straight rhythm. Number 2, we talked about tempo, fast versus kind of slower tempos. And number 3, we talked about major and minor and when it's appropriate to use those things. Guys, if you enjoyed this, I think you will love Steve's Blues Licks course. It's available at guitarzoom.com. Everybody that's already signed up for that thing is raving about it, even though a lot of people haven't even finished it yet. So if you'd like to check that out, it's available at guitarzoom.com. It's called Blues Licks by Steve Stine, and I think you will enjoy it. I hope that you have gotten benefit out of this. If you did, please share it. with someone that you think could also benefit. Steve, as always, brother, it is a pleasure. Is there anything else that you want to cover before we sign off here?
No, I think that's more than enough to get people thinking a little bit about this. So
Great. Well, thanks again for being here. I really appreciate you, man. And it's always a pleasure. And thank all of you for being here. It's awesome that you took time out of your life to be with us. That's a great compliment. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Hopefully we'll do it again soon.
All right, take care. See you later.
All right, big guy. Bye. Bye, everybody.